Okay, I'm going to make a start. First of all, thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jamie Wiseman. I'm the Senior Europe Advocacy Officer at the International Press Institute, which is a global media freedom organization based in Vienna. So thank you for taking the time to join us. We are exactly 10 days away now from the Hungarian election, in which the 16-year rule of the Fidesz party of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán faces its toughest test ever. Polling is consistently putting the opposition Tisza party of Péter Magyar in a clear lead, making a change in government look increasingly possible as we head into the final stretch of the campaign. I won't recap for this audience, but I think it's no exaggeration to say that the outcome of this election will be huge and have massive consequences, both for Hungary, for the European Union, and for the European continent itself. So a lot hangs in the balance, including the fate of media freedom. And in the last 16 years, Hungary has had, and I think has experienced, one of the most dramatic declines in media freedom, putting it ranking in among the lowest in Europe. And that's been driven by one of the biggest transformations of the media system in the country's history. And to do so, the Orbán government has first built and then maintained the most sophisticated model of media capture and control ever developed within the European Union, to the point where it's now estimated that the government wields direct or indirect control over 80% of the media market, with huge consequences for media pluralism and media independence. And this decline in media freedom, I think, has also accelerated wider democratic backsliding and autocratization, and made in the process Hungary the poster child for a liberal democracy, inspiring other would-be autocrats both in Europe and beyond. But now, after 16 years of this deterioration, on April 12th, the freedom of the press stands at a major crossroads. So I think ahead of the vote, there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of hypotheticals to deal with here. So in this webinar, we wanted to bring together leading Hungarian media experts and journalists to explore these two very diverging paths, kind of talk a little bit about what both would mean for media freedom, explain what we do know, and what could be in store moving forward, and basically fill in those gaps. So I'm joined today by Bea Bodrogi, the Hungarian media law expert and an expert advisor of the Rule of Law Lab at New York University's School of Law. And she's the co-author of a major recent report on media freedom in Hungary. I'm also joined by Dr. Gábor Bolyák, professor and head of the Department of Media and Communication at Eötvös Loránd University, and a senior researcher at the Murtek Media Monitor, which is, I would say, the country's leading media watchdog organization. We were due to be joined by Flora Garamvogli, the Hungary correspondent for The Guardian, but unfortunately she was unable to join us. So a big thank you for stepping in to Attila Mung, the Europe representative at the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is a New York-based, or at least headquartered, media freedom organization and an ally of IPI. And Attila is a former Hungarian journalist who worked in the country. So just a quick kind of just plan for the next hour. In the first section, we'll recap how we got from 2010 to where we are now, bringing us up to date. In the second section, we'll sketch out the two different scenarios. One, if a Fidesz victory, and the second, looking at Tisza's manifesto, what that includes, how significant it would be, and what its impact could be. And then in the second half, we'll have a broader discussion about how credible Tisza's reform proposals are for media, and what political and legal challenges they could face. And that will be a discussion, I think, about how difficult it is to uncapture a captured media ecosystem, and one that's specifically been designed to be hard to change. And then in the last section, we'll look at recommendations and proposals for the way forward for reform, and identify what real, true democratic media reform in Hungary would look like. We hope to leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions, and there'll be a Q&A. So if at the end you have questions, you can raise your hand and we can bring you onto the screen, and you can have your video on or off to ask a question. But in the meantime, please do put your questions into the chat, the Q&A, and I can read them out to the experts as we go along. So let's jump straight in. Bea, we're going to come to you first. As I said, you authored this major report that was published a month and a half ago, last month. So what were the key findings of the report, and bring us from 2010 up to today? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jamie, and welcome everyone here. Thanks for joining so many. I'm not sure that it's possible to summarize the last 16 years and the state of media freedom in Hungary in just a few minutes, so I really just highlight the main findings of our report and explain how we got here over the past 15 years. So Hungary is often described as a case of media capture, and I think that's accurate, but it is important to understand what that actually means in practice. What we show in the report since 2010, that the government hasn't relied on classic censorship. It has built a much more sophisticated system. And the core of this creation, this is a, and at the core of this is the creation of a pro-government media ecosystem. This includes the buyout of around 80% of the media market by oligarchs and businessmen close to the government, and the consolidation of hundreds of media outlets under Keshma, creating a very large centralized pro-government media bloc. At the same time, this system is financially sustained through state advertising, which is public money, and distributed on the basis of political loyalty. And this raises serious concerns from an EU law perspective, including unlawful state aid. These media outlets do not simply support the government, they function as a communication machinery. They amplify government narratives, spread disinformation, and run systematic smear campaigns against independent media, journalists, and political opponents. Public service media also part of this system. Instead of acting as an independent public broadcaster, it has become aligned with the government, both in terms of content and access. This is absolutely visible now during the election period. Just to bring one example, the leader of the main opposition party hasn't been invited to public service media for over a year and a half. And they also refuse to disclose public interest information, even if there are final court judgments requiring it to do so. And we also seeing increasingly aggressive responses to journalists. Just to bring one example from last week, when telex journalists sent questions to the media, public service media, they responded that they will only receive answers or send answers if telex journalists explain who they work for, who funds them, and how prove that they are sovereign media outlets. So this was the response by the public service media. Alongside this dominant pro-government media system, there is a second pillar of captured media in Hungary, which is our report about, basically, the systematic obstruction of independent media. And I think this is because independent journalists still perform a watchdog role. They ask questions, uncover serious corruption stories, and remain one of the few spaces where insiders are willing to leak information. As we outlined in our report, independent journalists are not formally banned. They are excluded, ignored, discredited, and increasingly targeted. So instead of shutting them down, the system makes their work harder, riskier, and less sustainable, in short. And in our report, we identified the main tools used for this: the use of law against journalists and media outlets, denial of access to information, smear campaigns, unlawful or secret surveillance, and legal pressure, including lawsuits. And they are not isolated incidents, they form a pattern. And what we are seeing now these days, especially ahead of the elections, is a clear escalation. Journalists are now being physically removed from public events, including election forums and demonstrations. And we are also seeing a continued targeting of individual journalists, such as Szabolcs Panyi. You might have heard about his story, who has been the subject of a long-running smear campaign, and now this has escalated into a criminal campaign against him, alleging espionage. And even if this doesn't ultimately lead to formal charges, it sends a very, very strong message and has a clear chilling effect. So when we are talking about media freedom in Hungary today, we are not just talking about captured media market. We are talking about a system where independent journalism still exists, but operates under constant pressure and increasing hostility. And I keep saying that independent media haven't disappeared in Hungary, but survived despite the system and not because of the system. Of course, there is much more we could say about this, but I will stop here, and maybe Attila and Gabor can add anything important that I haven't mentioned.
Anything else to add from your side? If not, I'd just say, I mean, yeah, the case against Szabolcs Panyi, both, I mean, all major media freedom organizations globally have responded to this. And I think we should just pause to say just how dramatic an escalation that is. Like you said before, the tactics in Hungary were, of course, never violence against the press, but it was essentially everything else, from capture, regulatory decisions, targeted strategic acquisition of newsrooms, slaps using GDPR, spyware, surveillance, obstruction, but also never really reaching the level of a criminal charge leveled against a journalist. And not just any journalist, but I think that one of the most renowned investigative journalists in the country. So I think it shows really the level that we've reached as we head towards the vote. Thanks, Bea, for summarizing that as best you can. I agree we can't cover everything. I would direct people to your report, because that's a much more long view summary. Attila, we've kind of heard there just how bad the situation has become in the last 15 years. The scenario of another Fidesz government, what do you think this would look like? I mean, we've had this slow erosion of media freedom. If Orbán was to pull off a shock victory, what do you think would be the next avenue or the next direction of pressure against media freedom and independent journalism?
Which, of course, we cannot possibly discard, although in Hungary, of course, there is a huge enthusiasm among opposition voters, and they are really hoping for a victory, and the opinion polls show this, but we cannot possibly discard this scenario, because as we have seen and Bea mentioned in the last couple of weeks, we see an intensification of media-related attacks, which makes us believe that some at the top echelons of the Hungarian government simply cannot afford to lose. And we need to be vigilant, because these remaining two weeks or 1.5 weeks can bring still surprises. So I think a lot depends on what the measure of victory will be for Fidesz. I mean, based on the opinion polls, if Fidesz wins, that will be a very narrow victory, which will create a pretty volatile situation in a country where, again, most opposition voters went into this election campaign hoping for change. The disappointment was huge already 4 years ago, when the opposition didn't win. So we can just expect that this will create a politically volatile situation. And my expectation is, under this scenario again, that Orbán will go very quickly forward, because even a narrow victory, he will understand and perceive it as a strong mandate to continue what he has been doing since he came to power. So in case Fidesz wins, I would expect a strong push against journalists and media, and completing kind of the legislative plans he had and he needed to put on hold, because of not necessarily only the international outcry, I would say very strongly the internal protest and the kind of dividing lines in Fidesz became pretty evident when Viktor Orbán put forward the foreign agent bill. But I would expect that they would go back to this agenda, and we can rely on actually what he says, what he announced. We don't have to guess. And with Orbán Viktor, many fall into the trap that you just can't believe that he will do this. But every time he proved that he will ready to go at great lengths to stay in power. And of course, we can discuss the scenario when he's out of power, because I have some guesses about his political strategy in that case. So every time he came to power since 2010, he had a very clear strategic goal in terms of media. We saw in 2010, he introduced the repressive media legislation, whose main goal actually was to take over public service media and create this close state-controlled ecosystem around the public service media. And then later, 2014 to 2018, he had plans to take over big chunks of the Hungarian media, biggest daily newspapers, biggest online newspapers, commercial TV stations. And then slowly he was zooming in where we are now, where we have really a handful of independent outlets who, by the way, do excellent and high quality journalism. And we have seen in the last legislative cycle that the goal was to attack the financial basis of this really resilient independent sector, because most of their funding comes from crowdfunding and diversified grants, which is very difficult to attack. So I think the kind of maybe just headlines, and we can go into what might come. But in the case of a Fidesz election victory, I think the rhetoric will be ramped up against foreign agents, against both journalists. He said it in his speech at the beginning of the year. He mentioned specifically so-called both journalists. So rhetoric, smear campaigns will intensify. I'm sure about that. And they will definitely go back to the foreign agent bill and bring it again to Parliament and try to push through with the impact we discussed at the time. We know that some media outlets have clear contingency plans. One investigative outlet even announced that they would move their operations. They already set up foreign or legal entities outside. The Sovereignty Protection Office will be strengthened. Maybe also its mandate will be extended by law, so that they could be more proactively investigate and go against independent media. I would expect that they would use it in a discretionary manner. So it will not be used as a blanket attack against independent media, but rather pick some of them and send messages. Because what we have seen in Szabolcs Panyi's case, it's, as Bea said, it's a message to everyone. They might not even want to go along with these charges, but it's a message. They picked the highest and the best, one of the best investigative journalists in Hungary. So that's clearly a message. And back to maybe the political situation. I mean, if it's a volatile situation, we can see Orbán using from the toolbox of actually Serbia, where we were during a press freedom mission last week. So if there is a volatile political situation where there are frequent opposition protests, then I would expect that the clampdown will strengthen.
Thanks, Attila. Yeah, please, Bea.
Just two things to add. I expect to restrict the funding models of the independent journalists and media outlets. That's one way to go. And we are already experiencing more litigation against journalists, like Péter Szijjártó, the foreign minister, hasn't used litigation till now. In the last few weeks, he had started litigation against Telek. So I can already feel that type of pressure from them to go.
Yeah, just on this issue of targeting funding, of course, independent media have long been cut off from receiving any form of state advertising. Pressure has been put on private enterprise and business to stop advertising in independent media. So would this be targeted at the 1% tax donation?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Exactly.
Could you just maybe explain how
painful for the media outlets, because that they get funding, quite a bit of funding from this 1%. tax offers.
And this is something that the government could scrap, this 1% tax donation. That it can be given to charitable foundations, right? So media have to have a kind of foundation arm or charitable arm. Is that right?
There needs to be an NGO to be able to support, but I think the government will find out the way how to select, among those NGOs and entities who might receive funding. So I don't think that's going to be a big task for them.
I mean, knowing the way they operate legislative moves, they sometimes, they might keep the regime, the system, but they might introduce like a sovereignty clause into and give the Sovereignty Protection Office a special, mandate to eventually block 1%. That was part of the foreign agent, the Russia-style foreign agent bill, actually. That was part of it, restricting the funding fundamentally of these outlets.
And just to recap, the Sovereignty Protection Office was established. It's headed by a former speechwriter of the Prime Minister, and it's tasked with identifying and addressing foreign agents, foreign mercenaries, foreign powers, and their impact in Hungary. But in reality, in the past year, it's acted in a highly discriminatory and targeted way against media and NGOs which receive any form of foreign funding, and falsely portraying them as agents of foreign powers. It's being challenged legally in front of the European Court of Justice by the European Commission. But the bill that you mentioned, Attila, this was from last May, a foreign funding and foreign agent bill, essentially, which would, if passed, have allowed the blacklisting, fines, and even closure of foreign funded media. And this is just, anybody receiving any grant for an investigative project, a community or language-based project. It's a huge net which can sweep up independent media. It was shelved after a lot of domestic and international pressure, but it remains in front of Parliament and can technically be brought back any time. So you mentioned, I think there's been speeches where the Prime Minister has mentioned about finishing the job. So I don't think he's mentioned it by name, or has he, specifically this foreign funding bill about bringing it back and finishing the job? Has it been named specifically that this is what they would return to?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think the way he put that we will finish the job. We all understood.
The message is clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks for summarizing that. Let's turn now to the second section. I want to come to you, Gabor. Tisa's election manifesto, I think a lot of people within Hungary would have read it, but for an international audience, what specifically is there in there about media information and issues that could affect the media? And what impact could they have if implemented?
Okay, just before answering your question, I'm sure that Orbán directly mentioned the law, that they will pass it, and not Orbán only, but other Fidesz politicians only named also the exact law what was mentioned before, this foreign agent law. So it's not only a theory that it is what we know, and it also means and yeah, what we experienced in the last weeks or hours, everything is so fast. I also cannot really follow the events. So this is a point where the question is also that Hungary can be anyway seen as a democracy, or will we go farther on the way of Belarusia or Turkey and so on. And this is also a big question for the European Union because it is also important to make it clear that everything what happened in front of the eyes of the decision makers of the European Union, and for a very, very long time it was funded by the European Union. All of the anti-European Union campaigns were funded from European monies, what is crazy. And one other remarks, both Attila and Bea mentioned the importance of the independent journalist, and we cannot be grateful enough for these journalists who are making really great job, and without whom we wouldn't have any chance to have at least the option to have this regime change. So only the work of the journalists were strong enough to build up a new chance, a new hope, and a new opposition party and a new opposition leader. It is very important to see, and it is also a very important lesson from the Hungarian case that even if you have a democracy, it is very important to know the value of journalism, independent journalism, high quality journalism, and so on. And about Tisza Party and the program of the Tisza Party. First of all, it's very interesting for us to see that there is a program from a party, because Fidesz had its last program in 2010, and also that time media was not in the focus, even if one of the first steps was the beginning of re-establishing of the whole media system. Now in the Tisza Party program, we can find some very important statements and ideas about how to come back to a democratic public sphere, even if it is not perfect. Not all of the problems are covered, but the message itself that they know that we need a normal democratic media system, and it is very, very important. The program is interestingly focusing on the institutions like public media, like the media authority, and like organizations who are taking part in the placing of state advertisement. This is therefore interesting why these institutions, almost all of these, are regulated by a two-thirds majority. And this is a very important question of the regime change. You also should know that Orbán used this two-thirds majority as a tool for guaranteeing his power, also for a case when he is not the prime minister anymore. Without a two-thirds majority, it is very, very difficult to change the media organizations, but also several other organizations that are taking part, for example, in guaranteeing the rights of the journalists. And we will see. So no one is so brave to say that Tisza Party will have the two-thirds majority. It's a big, big question how to handle this situation. In the program, you can read that we need a new public broadcast or public media in general, because we don't have any public media now. What we have, and it is also clearly stated in this program, this is a pure propaganda machine funded by billions of taxpayers' forints, serving only the Fidesz interests. It's a very interesting idea to shut down the public media, or at least to shut down the news services of the public media for temporary time, when the new government, so long that the new government can build up the new regime, how to safeguard and provide an objective, neutral, impartial informing the public media. Honestly, I don't really know how they imagine it, how to shut it down. It will be not so simple. We saw something like this in Greece some years ago. That was not a big success. That was a huge international scandal, even if I don't know if it was grounded or not. And I'm sure that in the case of Hungary, it would be absolutely reasonable, because somehow you have to show the point that that was the time of the propaganda, and now we start the time of the democratic information. The tool, the way how to do that is not really clear for me. The goal, of course, to have an impartial, balanced information is absolutely in line with our ideas about public media. The program also wants to have a new media authority. because the current media authority is made of only Fidesz guys, and it's clearly proven that in its decision, this media authority is absolutely biased, and in every cases where they have to provide, they have to serve the interest of the ruling party, then they did it every time. And it's clear we need a new one. I, again, not really know how to do that without a two-third majority in the parliament. What is important and what is an issue, what you also can solve without two-third majority is the stopping of the state advertisement, at least for a time. And this is not only important because now state advertisement is a tool of spreading propaganda. The content of the state advertisement is the propaganda itself in most of the cases. And of course, it is the driver of the whole pro-government media, the fuel of the whole pro-government media. It doesn't mean that without state advertisement, the pro-government media cannot continue its work. I'm sure that they have enough resources in the background that they can use, even if they have to use it for 4 years, they can do that. However, it is also important because this public money is also used to totally distort the whole advertisement market. Now, the advertisement prices in Hungary are much lower than the normal market prices should be. And if this state money is, if this public money is disappearing from the media market, then the normal advertisement prices can increase to the normal market level, and it will help without any further steps. A huge, it will mean a huge help for the independent media. But is not mentioned in the program, and this is just my last 2 sentences, is missing for me because one of the most important issues would be the normalizing the relationship between the politicians and the journalists. It would be very important to see a statement, a sentence about that we won't discriminate between journalists. All of the journalists will give answers. Politicians will be available for the journalists, and the politicians know the role of the journalists and the media in a democracy. And if this behavior, if this political attitude could be really carried out, then it would mean also that all of the public institutions, from the public organizations to the schools and health organizations, everyone would be ready again to give answers to the journalists, because now this is not the situation. Everyone in these public institutions follow the example of Orbán, who is not speaking with independent journalists, and also these organizations can say that in this case we don't give you any answer. So we need a new behavior, a new attitude on the side of the politicians to have a normal discussion between the public sphere and the political elite.
Thanks, Gabor. Yeah, thanks for summing that up. I was surprised when I read the Tisza manifesto how much emphasis they put on media and how many different elements there were. There's a lot to dig into there. Yeah, Bear?
Yeah, just one comment on that. I have already read that Tisza program on media, and I fully share with what Gabor said. But on the other hand, when we are watching closely this election campaign, there is no political discussion going on different topics about anything. It's more about political narratives than political debates and debate or discussions about political programs. And we cannot see any experts appearing, discussing programs. So I really, really hope that in the background people are working hard and working even on the media, how to reform media system. But that's a kind of worrying sign for me that I cannot see. There is no names visible who is working on media issues. That just a side note on that.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, reading through these proposals, it sets out an agenda for a pretty dramatic change in Hungary regarding media. And I think why we would probably all, and the manifesto sets out the end point, most people from a democratic point would agree with. The means to get there are going to be extremely complex, challenging, and face both political and legal hurdles. So just to come back to, I'd like to quickly discuss 3 points you mentioned, Gabor. The first, public media; the second, the media regulation system, the Media Council; and then third, just to come back on the state advertising. So like you said, in the manifesto, there's a pledge to essentially suspend news programming at the public broadcaster until reform is carried out. It's a big suggestion. To do that, of course, you need to address management issues. But the management of the public broadcaster is appointed by the Media Council, the media regulator. So it would there's an interlocking issue of reform here. The Media Council itself, its members under changes through Fidesz, are now appointed for nine-year terms. And it's a body that's completely dominated by Fidesz aligned individuals. So if we're to reform the public broadcaster, the first question would be, do we need to be looking at the media regulatory system? And the second would be, is there anything currently under Hungarian law that will allow a suspension of public broadcasting? I mean, I think back to Poland when the new Tusk government came in, and we had a very captured public media there as well. And I think there was a very controversial step taken to also there was a blackout of media at the public broadcaster, and then it was put into a state of liquidation, to which it remains in these days. So, yeah, is there something justified within Hungarian law currently that would allow the government to do this?
If I may, then so we cannot have this Polish way, because the regulation is also not the same. The main player of the Hungarian public media is not a company. That was in Poland, but a public institute, this a company law way that Poland could have. However, we have one new opportunity, and this is European Media Freedom Act. Even if European Media Freedom Act is dealing only in one article with public media, it can be essential for the reform of the Hungarian situation, because once it requires an objective and impartial information in the public media. Okay, I don't know how to enforce it, but secondly, there are some regulation about how to appoint the leaders of the public media. And the Hungarian regulation and the Hungarian praxis is not in line with the European Media Freedom Act, because European Media Freedom Act requires an open, non-discriminative, fair procedure that will lead to the appointing of the management of the public media. In Hungary, it is a pure political appointment. As you, Jamie, said, the Media Council, the head of the Media Council, as an individual, as a single person, appoints the leader of this fund, that is, as I said, the main player of the public media. And the Media Council is also a very important player in nominating the leaders of the other public media organization. However, you cannot find any open, any non-discriminative proceeding. So I understand this European Media Freedom Act rule that we need a kind of call, a kind of application, a publicly organized application, and it cannot be the way what we now have in the law. So we can use European Media Freedom Act for having it. The question again, even if we know that the European law has a priority over the national laws, how can you have in a country where the state president and the constitutional court serve 100% Fidesz, even if Fidesz in opposition? This is a huge question. I see the legal basis for the reform. However, I also see the problems of all kinds of legislation.
Thanks. Yeah, and you mentioned, I mean, we go back to this issue again of a lot will hinge on whether Tisza, if it was to win, would have a 2/3 majority or not. So much of the Hungarian political system, the legislative agenda, has been shaped by this quite strange factor in the last decade. One thing you mentioned that a new government could do without 2/3, and it's in Tisza's manifesto, is they would put a moratorium on all state advertising to media until an assessment is done. And then I would assume that the market-based principles would be followed for advertising rather than political principles as it is right now. And just to recap, as I said earlier, under the system, it's bloated with billions and billions of florins. It's the biggest system of its kind anywhere in Europe. And in the carrot and stick approach, it's allowed the government to advertise in media that are providing friendly coverage and cut off media that are providing critical coverage. But this is kind of bloated, this massive kind of consolidation of pro-government media, a lot of them in Kesma. So if a moratorium was to be put on, I was reading the other day that some media within Kesma get 70 to 80% of their revenue from state advertising. If this was to be, and this is in a number of other media as well. I mean, this could lead to closure of media, no? Or you said earlier you think they could kind of chug along and survive or redistribute funds, but I mean, could this lead to the closure of pro-government media, do you think?
For a long run, yes, I think, but for the short run, not really. I think as we can see that gongos such as the government-funded NGOs still alive, and they are pretty much funded by public funds and by the government. So I think they can be sustained for years. They can support these media outlets who serve the government at present. So I think they will survive without state advertisements for a short long. That's what I think.
Yeah, and maybe two things we shouldn't forget. Orbán was in opposition for 8 years, and at the same time was able to build an extensive, at the time, opposition media empire. So we have a good fundraiser also here in this equation, and and also back to the political situation, in case Tisza wins and not 2/3 majority, but a simple absolute majority, Orbán's political strategy will be clearly to come back quickly. And we see that already in the current political communication, because the only communication is war and crisis, which we know will come in the second part of the year. So this is something we can predict, that again, if opposition win is materialized, the chances for a functioning democracy in a stable environment will be just very low, actually, because there will be a huge crisis later this year, which will clearly affect Hungary, and energy crisis and other food crisis. And Orbán is already capitalizing on this. So the B plan is clearly to stage a quick comeback, a little bit like Trump style.
I just want to add that, maybe some of the titles, some of the media outlets can be quickly closed because they don't need it anymore. And this is also because despite of this huge amount of resources, they made several failures, and there are several media outlets that couldn't be successful. They lost, for example, the majority of the readers of the regional dailies that were the most important media outlets in Hungary outside of Budapest. And now they have a much lower reader than before they took these papers. So they made failures, and it led to a media system where the traditional media in general is not so important anymore. The television, they have TV2. TV2 will stay absolutely stable, no question. It can be successful also based on market incomes. And the internet news portals, these are important. There is the Fidesz position not so strong. They have the only tabloid in Hungary. This can be a leading Fidesz affiliated media in the future. Blick, that was sold last year by Ringier, the Switzer Ringier, to the Fidesz media empires. So they don't need all of these titles. They need a new strategy on social media, and they need the media outlets with the highest reach, and they can have the influence on the Fidesz voters for a long time. I don't know how long, but we are not speaking about 1 or 2 years. At least 4 years they can survive, and the Fidesz narratives will be very strong.
Thanks, Gabor. Yeah, so I think it looks clear that, I mean, if there was a Tisza victory, the shift in the normalization of the advertising market in Hungary would I think have major ripples and kind of need to a realignment. So I think that's going to be one of the things people are looking at very, very closely. We've got less than 15 minutes left, and I do want to leave questions, time at the end for questions. Just a reminder, if you have questions now to ask, you can put them into the Q&A. Otherwise, yeah, keep your questions for the last 10 minutes. We've touched on a number of topics. Gabor, you mentioned there are things which are not in the manifesto, like the Sovereignty Protection Office. Kejma is not in there. It's a massive, massive issue. One thing that is in there is spyware and the commitment to launch an investigation into the role of state bodies and intelligence agencies in spyware abuse. Hungary is one of the countries with the most confirmed cases in the EU of spyware attacks on journalists. I think it's at least 10 journalists, including investigative journalists, photographers, media owners have been targeted. So we so far have zero accountability there. So I think that was following the European Parliament's PEGA inquiry, which Hungary was a major focus of. I think that would be a major chance for accountability moving forward. So just to pivot now, I think I'll come back to Bea, because yeah, your report at the end, you obviously lay out a number of recommendations for reform of Hungary's media ecosystem. What do you think democratic and true sustainable media reform in Hungary looks like, and what should be the priorities moving forward if you are to see a change in government?
I think Gabor has already mentioned most of it. But in our report, we structured the recommendations around 2 levels: what needs to happen in Hungary and what needs to happen at EU level. And I think what we haven't mentioned so far, what is easy to reform and to change, is to provide information for journalists to have access to information. And it's not only changing the laws, enacting new laws, it's a political will to going back to normal, to talk with journalists, to respond to journalists' answers. And you know, there are many relevant EU regulations, directives. EMFA has already been mentioned, but SLAP directive is also relevant. A European Court of Human Rights judgment needs to be enforced. These regulations and directives needs to be implemented. So in that case, I think the new government will be in a good situation, just implementing all those EU regulations and to comply with all these regulations and implement the judgments. I think this is the way to go. So this is both on national and mainly on national level, and Gabor has already covered the economic side, the advertising part of the changes.
Thanks, Bear. And I know, Attila, that CPJ is planning to kind of list the priorities for media reform. Is there anything else that you're looking at or you want to highlight?
I mean, these recommendations, or rather priorities we are working on, will not bring any surprise for those who know Hungary, because of course our priorities will build on various reports. I would definitely mention Mérték's excellent reports, and also Bea's and this latest comprehensive report about the last 16 years. Plus, we have rule of law reports from the European Union. So we have
everything is documented.
Good list. Yeah, it's well documented. So I usually say about Hungary, it's a meticulously documented crime scene. We know everything. We know how it happened. We know that the person, well, hopefully not died, but will hopefully come back one day. But we have all the documentation. So of course our recommendations will. I mean, we will bring a short video next week. I interviewed a couple of Hungarian journalists, and it shows the kind of sophisticated repressive system of the Hungarian media ecosystem, because everything is connected, like the obstruction of information, the barriers to getting information, getting to be able to speak with politicians, get sources from the spyware, the surveillance, everything comes together. So of course our recommendations will focus on these issues, like the access of information, the Sovereignty Protection Office, the abolish the Sovereignty Protection Office, and revoke definitively the foreign agent law and smear campaigns against journalists. So they are not surprises. I mean, I would like to see with the Tisza government that these Pegasus cases are actually reopened, because even if the Hungarian authorities found nothing to see in these cases, these are serious cases. And I really hope that, we will be in a situation where the European Union might have learned from the last time such a system change happened in 2010, and the Union was basically without tools to properly approach these issues. Once there is a chance in Hungary to rebuild the democratic ecosystem, I think the European Union will have a huge role, because by now, hopefully, EU officials realize that media ecosystem is not an abstract thing. It can create, an unhealthy media ecosystem can create huge problems within the European Union, even if it's in one country, which is not true, because Hungary is not the only country, but maybe Hungary is the first, and the European Union was not really able to approach it from this kind of broader rule of law perspective.
Thanks, Attila. Yeah, I think it's important, like you said, to differentiate between the things that are going to be extremely complex and challenging and the things that actually are remarkably easy. And one of those is improving the climate for the access to information for journalists. On a day-to-day basis, this has been a major blockade of the ability of journalists to normally do their job, including freedom of information requests as well. And that's something that...
Sorry to interrupt. Just here it comes my comment on this, that this will be the interest of the government, if Tisza wins, to reveal information that has been hiding for years now. So I think this will be really a real interest all of the actors, like the government, the journalists. So I think that's what I expect in case of Tisza win.
Thanks. Yeah, we have a question.
I would emphasize, sorry, Jamie, that it will not come automatically. So my fear is that, we need to be exact with words. In Hungary, they don't speak about regime change. They speak about system change. Because once Orbán built a system, you have to count on that once the system will end and people will want a different system. So my fear is that a different system will be built, which will be equally, maybe less openly hostile to professional journalism and what I would say public interest journalism or accountability journalism, because especially if the win is big, but even if the win is small, the government in a very volatile situation will be not necessarily interested without outside pressure. Outside pressure can mean NGOs and civil society as well to do the right thing.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe if we have time before the end, I'd come back to this issue of the European Media Freedom Act and the role of the EU here. But just want to ask the question that we have one in the chat from Mina Delic, from Hungarian minority media in Serbia. And she's asking a question about the scenes that we saw on, I think, Saturday or Sunday in Serbia for the municipal and local elections, where a number of journalists and media workers and citizens, of course, were exposed to violence. Journalist equipment was destroyed, and these was very visible. So the question was, if we look ahead to the 12th of April, do you think that something similar could happen in Hungary? Have we reached that level? I mean, Attila and I were in Serbia just last week on a media freedom mission where we were looking specifically at the issue of the safety of journalists. So I'd maybe put that one to you, Attila.
So repeat again the question exactly, because there was a huge comment afterwards about Serbia, and I don't want to be mistaken.
If what happened in Serbia with violence against journalists reporting on the elections could happen in Hungary.
So, you know, in the last 16 years, one of the things I kept telling about press freedom in Hungary, that luckily there is no physical violence. Now it seems to be changing. And, you know, last week when these incidents Bea mentioned happened, where journalists were pushed, obstructed, camera, you know, these might seem mild incidents from outside, but these are actually very serious incidents in Hungary, where people don't necessarily, you know, go this way against each other, especially against journalists. So I saw a really worrying sign, and sometimes I was kind of worried for the reporters being in the middle of the crowd, which I have never been in Hungary. But this is what I expect if there is a volatile political situation. Either way, actually, it can also happen with an opposition win, because then Fidesz voters might be very emotional, especially if the win on the opposition side is not decisive. And journalists will be increasingly facing this kind of attacks. Also, what we saw in Serbia, that sometimes these attacks are organized, sometimes masked people attack journalists, which clearly show an organized nature. And also in Hungary, we have seen that these black dressed guys overseeing the security of demonstrations, they are organized, and organized probably from the regime.
I would just add that at a point it is out of the decision of the politicians. So the emotions are so sharp now in Hungary that everything can happen and no one can control it anymore. By this time, organized or other kind of violence was not typical, but yeah, so this is a very unique situation now in Hungary, and I hope that there will be no journalist who can experience this kind of Serbian experiences.
Thanks. Just one other question from Jorge Raya Pons in the chat is, do you think Brussels should take a firmer action to ensure the survival of independent journalism in Hungary? That kind of connects back to the European Media Freedom Act. I don't know who wants to take that question.
Yeah, I start, and Bea, you can. So I say every time that Fidesz was not a huge surprise for me, but what the European Union did or didn't, that was a very, very disappointing for me. And so we know that at least regarding the state advertisement, there is an ongoing procedure since 2019. Now we have another one from the last year, but we are speaking about 7 years. This is one of the biggest problems, and there was another problem regarding another claim regarding the public media since 2016. It was finished in 2024 by rejecting our complaint. So I haven't felt any time that the European Union really understood the situation in Hungary, at least regarding the media. And I saw every time that there are the tools, and we deliver the data that would support using the tools, and they didn't do that. So it must be a very important lesson for the European Union, because Hungary was the pioneer, but this kind of illiberal tendencies are now all over Europe, and if Europe couldn't fight against such a small country like Hungary, what can it do against Le Pen's France, AfD's Germany, and so on? So it could be a very good laboratory also for the European tools. I cannot understand why they didn't use this opportunity.
Thanks, Gobo. And just to answer quickly the second question on the do we see the media capture playbook spreading to other European countries? IPI, has been tracking media capture for years now. We have a major project on this, and in the last few years, I think we've seen, massive copycat tactics used by allies in the Czech Republic, with Babiš now back, but even the previous Babiš administration, Janez Janša in Slovenia directly copied a number of Orbán's tactics in Slovakia, neighboring Slovakia. The current government of Robert Fico is currently trying to push through parliament a bill on the restructuring of the media regulatory body, which would have similar effects as those in Hungary. So yes, it has spread. The major factor is now we have the European Media Freedom Act, which is a landmark regulation and sets out a number of kind of standards that are obligatory for member states to align their national media legislation with. Hungary was always, basically MFA was designed for Hungary, and then I think they worked backwards. So both before and even more so now, it's going to be the biggest test of MFA to see if its rules can be adhered to and whether it can guide the process for democratic reform. So it's going to be extremely interesting to see. I want to wrap up soon. We're 1 minute over. If people could give a couple more minutes, that would be great. The other question I see is from Dominique Thierry. Public understanding and support to journalists is crucial to push back targeted violence. Do you see a change in public trust in journalism in Hungary? Whoever wants to take that one.
In a way, yes. I think because there is a growing number of supporters and readers who give funding to independent media outlets. There is a need for quality journalism. I think that we all can see. So my answer is yes. But I think that's the journalism globally, I think in crisis in many ways. We don't have time to go into details, but that's, I think in a situation where independent Hungary is in Hungary, I think they would definitely need more support, and not only from readers, but from EU and from other levels as well. So I can see the role of EU as well in that regard, supporting and having funding models for independent journalists, not only in Hungary, but I think in EU level, in all EU countries.
Thanks, Bear. Okay, we should wrap up now. Okay, one last question. A Dutch journalism student planning to go to Budapest on the day of the elections. Are there any safety concerns that they should be aware of when documenting possible riot outbreaks after the election? Maybe if I think we kind of addressed this issue already a little bit. So I think, we're over time. So I'll wrap up there. Maybe I just want to give each of the panelists a last kind of concluding remark, or anything you didn't say that you'd like to say now, just to wrap up. If not, then I can finish. Well, I hope the last hour has given a bit of a clearer picture, both at what's at stake, how different the two paths ahead for media freedom can be, and also I think how challenging reform is going to be, both politically, legally, practically. if we step back, I think we should be sober and be open about how challenging this is going to be, to uncapture a media system which has been captured over a 16-year period. It's going to be very, very complex. So there are a lot of challenges, but I think from my side, what gives hope is looking, and I think everyone on the panel has mentioned it, looking at the independent journalist community in Hungary. They've been absolutely amazing, and even in the last few weeks, the stories that they've been breaking and the democratic watchdog role that they've been providing has been just amazing to see, even under all of the economic, regulatory, surveillance, obstruction pressures that they're facing. So that's, I think, where hope lies. And if they're given a level playing field, then I think media pluralism and independent journalism can grow and thrive in Hungary again. And I really hope to see that. So we'll wrap up there for now. Thank you to all of you for joining. Thank you especially to the panelists, to Bea, to Gabor, and Attila for stepping in. It's been great to have you. And thank you for watching, and see you next time.